Hello. Today we will be discussing a significant impact of climate change, the impact of glacier decline on freshwater in Southeast Asia.
The region of Southeast Asia includes countries like Myanmar, Thailand, and Indonesia. It's considered the wettest region of Asia and is mostly made up of tropical forests. During monsoon season, there are many extreme precipitation events which can lead to intense flooding, which destroys crops and infrastructure. And although this can seem negative, many people also depend on it for their livelihood.
The thinning of the Himalayan glaciers will affect freshwater all across Asia. New satellite imaging techniques allows for more detailed analysis of glaciers. This includes being able to tell the thinness of glaciers. They noticed that in certain regions, particularly high elevations, there was increased thinning there. This can lead to increased water melt of the glaciers, which leads to more floods, including landslides. These will affect both the environment and those who rely on the fresh water to survive. Glaciers in the Himalayas doesn't just have an environmental impact, but a political impact as well. Himalayan farmers require the meltwater from the glaciers to produce their crops. Currently, the Himalayan glaciers have been losing 1.5 feet of ice each year since 2000. This means less meltwater is coming down for the farmers to use. This leads to less crops being produced and more competition over a resource. Competition over a resource can lead to increased violence and conflict within Southeast Asia.
Based on a study of glacier changes in the source area of the Irrawaddy River in Myanmar, glaciers in that area have lost about 60% of volume and mass from 1976 to 2015, and this can be seen in the graph on the upper left. In the map on the bottom left, you can see the glaciers in the source area of which they took their data from. These glacier changes have implications for river runoff, as the increased amount of water coming from the glaciers will change the river flow, and the increased amount of water will also increase the overall water level of the river in the short term, but in the long term, when these glaciers decline completely, the river will lose a vital source of water during the dry season.
Water plays a major role in agriculture in the Indo-Gangetic Plain. As you can see from the charts below, the Indus region especially receives majority of its water from glacier melt. There are over 129 million farmers in the Indus and Ganges region, and they rely on the snow and glacier melt to sustain and to farm. They need that water to produce their crops. They provide enough crops for 38 million people. Any reduction, as seen in the projection of 2/3 of the Hindu Kush Himalayan glaciers being lost by the end of the century, will result in deterioration of the agriculture in this region and the well-being of all the people involved.
The article "The Great Glacier and Snow-Dependent Rivers of Asia and Climate Change" discusses the 1.9 billion people living in Asia that are supplied freshwater by the Hindu Kush Himalaya mountains. This is a large, high-density population that depends on glacial melt freshwater in a geopolitically sensitive region, meaning that future conflicts over freshwater are not only a possibility but are actively becoming a reality. Climate change has already had an impact on the freshwater supply from glacial melt. Increased warming has accelerated glacier melt, impacting freshwater availability, food, and livelihoods. As weather grows increasingly extreme, the occurrences of floods and droughts has risen, which in turn has reduced crop productivity. Additionally, the shift in timing of glacial melt does not always line up with the peak agricultural demand, further reducing crop productivity. The availability of fresh water causes many shifts that may not be immediately obvious. The increased water stress has caused farmers to increase their water storage and modify grazing patterns. Some farmers have abandoned their agricultural practices entirely, instead turning to tourism or labor migration for a more predictable income. Some groups have had to relocate entirely, finding that their lifestyles are no longer supported without the fresh water they once had. The impacts of climate change and shifts in glacial melt have also caused cultural shifts. The figure on the left shows just how many impacts glacial melt has, including its impact on hydropower, irrigation, wells, and ecosystems by the ocean.
The impact of glacier decline on freshwater has become a threat to people's food security as crop yield and food production has declined. This has also resulted in a loss of income for many people, and not only has this affected people in their own personal financial states, but it has also affected countries on a national economic level. Land availability has also decreased as not only are the rivers expanding, but the floods are causing land and houses to be destroyed. This has led people to move inwards, and this has created further conflicts.
The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change discussed possible solutions to mitigate impacts of changing glacial melt. One branch of this is agriculture. Climate-smart agriculture refers to strategies that directly address stresses caused by climate change. Adaptations include changing crop type and variety, changing seed quality, and changing fertilizer application. Additionally, policies must be made to support farmers in their shifting practices in order to ensure sustainable livelihoods and adequate crop production. Another branch of solutions addresses infrastructure. Flood mitigation procedures and storm drainage systems must be updated to handle increased severity and frequency of floods. Listed below are our sources. Thanks for watching.